Sri Guru Samhita, the legend of the Supreme Guru. Om Sri Lakshmi Narasimhaswamy Banavara. Original in Marathi as Sri Guru Charitra by Sri Gangadhara Saraswati. Composition in Sanskrit by His Holiness Sri Vasudevananda Saraswati, also known as Tembe Maharaj. This translation into English is provided by Dr. Narasimhaswamy Banavara. Chapter 52. Sri Guru Samhita, the legend of the Supreme Guru, synopsis of all the chapters. Salutations to Lord Ganapati, salutations to Lord Dattatreya. 1. In chapter 1, Saraswati, the son of Gangadhara and the author of this text, offers salutations to all his favorite gods and offers benediction. Namadharaka is anxious for the Supreme Guru's darshan. He has darshan of the ascetic Guru Siddha in his dream. These are also very blissful events. The verses have been composed using different meters. 2. In chapter 2, Guru Siddha explains to Namadharaka the details of the creation of the universe by Lord Brahma, the conversation between Lord Brahma and Kalipurusha, and the story of Deepaka's service to his Guru. 3. In chapter 3 appears a story of King Ambarisa. While King Ambarisa was performing the Ekadashi ritual without even drinking water, Sage Durvasa arrives. When Sage Durvasa does not come in time for King Ambarisa's breaking of the fast, the king attempts to drink water and not break the rules of the ritual. Ambarisa drinks water and becomes a target for Sage Durvasa's curse. The Bhaktavatsala Lord Vishnu assumes the curse in order to protect his devotee and incarnates several times on this earth to protect Dharma. One can see the level of patience that Lord Vishnu exhibits. 4. In chapter 4, the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, arrive in the form of mendicants to test the virtuosity of Lady Anusuya and ask her to serve food to them in the nude. With her immense and unsurpassed chasteness and virtuosity, Anusuya transforms the Trinity into babies, feeding them her own breast milk and appeases them. This resulted in her fame spreading all over the three worlds and the incarnation of the Supreme Guru, Lord Dattatreya, as a manifestation of the Trinity. 5. In chapter 5 is the description of the Supreme Guru's Sripada Sri Vallabha. In Pitapura, while a Shraddha was going on in the house of a Brahmin, Appalaraju, Lord Dattatreya arrives in the form of a mendicant before the Shraddha seeking alms. Appalaraju's wife, Sumati, donates the alms. Pleased with her, Lord Dattatreya is born from her womb as Sripada Sri Vallabha. The Supreme Guru, Sripada Sri Vallabha, showers his mercy upon his lame and blind brothers, who became complete and perfect, and also become scholars. Sripada Sri Vallabha assumes sannyasa. 6. In chapter 6, Ravana appeases Lord Shiva and obtains his Atmalinga. While he is transporting the Shivalinga to his city Lanka, Lord Ganapati, motivated by Lord Vishnu, comes in the form of a young Brahmin boy and foils the attempts of Ravana. The Shivalinga, Mahabaleshwara, gets rooted in the ground and the site becomes famous as the holy city of Gokarna. 7. In chapter 7, Maharshi Gautama extols the greatness and the legend of the holy city of Gokarna. There is also a description of how King Mitrasaha attains the status of Brahma Rakshasa, how he was relieved of the curse and how he begot children. There is also an account of one Chandala woman who was delivered unto salvation. 8. In chapter 8, the Supreme Guru Sripada Sri Vallabha explains the greatness of the Pradosha Vrata to a widow who was unable to face the criticism of the world because of her stupid son and who had come along with her son to commit suicide. The Supreme Guru saves the mother and her son from committing suicide and transforms that stupid boy into a scholar. He also grants her a boon, stating that a very competent son would be born to her in her next birth. 9. In chapter 9, the Supreme Guru Sripada Sri Vallabha notices the deep desire of a devoted washerman and blesses him to enjoy all the royal pleasures in his next life. There is also a description of how the Supreme Guru Sripada Sri Vallabha disappeared from the common view of the world in Kurugadde on the banks of the river Krishna and how he still remains there in spirit, fulfilling the desires of all his true devotees. 10. In chapter 10, a merchant devotee of Lord Dattatreya proceeds to Kurugadde to host a grand banquet for the Brahmins in honor of Lord Dattatreya and the Supreme Guru Sripada Sri Vallabha. He starts with all the items required for the banquet. On the way, some thieves obtain his confidence and join him on the journey. After some time, the thieves kill the merchant and loot all his stuff. At that time, the Supreme Guru Sripada Sri Vallabha appears in disguise and kills the thieves and revives the dead merchant. 11. In chapter 11 is the account of the birth and childhood of Narahari. As the results of the merit obtained from the Pradoshavata, Amba and Madhava begets a son by the name of Narahari. The infant uttered the divine Om syllable immediately after birth. The entire town was astounded by this. The child did not speak a word except Om for the rest of his childhood. On the day of his Upanayan, that is sacred third ceremony, when his mother offered him Bhiksha for the first time, the three Vedas serenely flowed from his lips like the divine waters of the river Ganga. The mother was overjoyed at this event. 12. In chapter 12 is the account of how the dispassionate Narahari showed no interest in any childhood games, how he fulfilled the desires of his mother, obtained her permission and went to Kashi, how he accepted sannyasa and how he attained the name of Sri Narasimha Saraswati. 13. In chapter 13, the Supreme Guru returns to his town as he had previously promised his mother and inquires about the welfare of his relatives. He goes on the river Godavari pilgrimage. He provides relief to the Brahmin who, unable to tolerate his stomach pains, had come to the river to commit suicide. The description is very interesting. 14. In chapter 14 is an account of how Sayam Deva was in fear of being killed by a Muslim Nawab and how the Supreme Guru assured him and said, "Do not fear." Instead of being tortured and killed by the Muslim Nawab, Sayam Deva returned after being honored by the Nawab. Sayam Deva returns with extreme joy, dancing like an intoxicated peacock to obtain the darshan of the Supreme Guru. 15. In chapter 15, the Supreme Guru inspires his disciple to go on a long pilgrimage. He explains the procedures of performing the pilgrimage and its benefits. 16. In chapter 16, the Supreme Guru gives illustrations of three disciples of sage Dhaumya in order to transform a stubborn disciple into a good and positive natured man. He also blesses the man to attain supreme knowledge. 17. In chapter 17, there is an account of a young and stupid son of a scholar. Since all the elders of the village reprimanded and criticized him constantly, the young man was disgusted with himself, and he cut off his tongue and offered it to the goddess. In his dream, the goddess instructed him to go to the Supreme Guru. With the mercy and blessings of the Supreme Guru, the boy regained his tongue and became a great scholar. 18. In chapter 18, the Supreme Guru went to a poor Brahmin's house for Bhiksha. After the meal, he blessed the Brahmin and while leaving, destroyed a creeper that was the source of food for the Brahmin's family. All the family members saw the uprooted creeper near the door and, overcome by sorrow, criticized the Supreme Guru. The Brahmin advised everyone not to do so and began to clear up the creeper. When he pulled out all the roots of the creeper, he found an immense treasure buried there. Amazed and astounded at the Supreme Guru's blessing, the Brahmin and his wife rushed to the Supreme Guru and sought his forgiveness. Even though everyone sought refuge with the Supreme Guru. 19. In chapter 19 is the description of Amarapura. The Supreme Guru is honored by the yoginis and he blesses them. Ganganuja becomes the object of Supreme Guru's mercy. The greatness of Adambara is extolled. The Supreme Guru establishes his padukas there and remained there for a few days. 20. In chapter 20, the Supreme Guru provides relief to a lady who was troubled by a pishacha, it's a flesh-eating demon, and blessed her to beget two sons. The elder son died at an early age. The sorrowful woman refused to give up her dead son's body for cremation. A brahmachari advises her with words of wisdom. 21. In chapter 21, the ascetic advises the lady who is mourning the death of her son. He advises her about the philosophy of life and about the relationship of house, property and children, which are as fleeting as the bolts of lightning. He says that there is no point in becoming filled with sorrow. Later, he brings the dead boy back to life. 22. In chapter 22 is the account of how the Supreme Guru went to Gandharvanagara, how he performed his rituals at the Sangam of the river Bhima and Amaraja, how he blessed a woman so that her barren buffalo yielded copious amounts of milk, and how he also accepted the milk as Bhiksha. In chapter 23 is the account of how the Supreme Guru's fame of making the barren buffalo yield milk spread all over the regions, and how the king of the city came to meet the Supreme Guru. As per the king's request, the Supreme Guru agreed to reside at the matha that the king constructed for the Supreme Guru. At the gates of the city, the Supreme Guru encountered a Brahma Rakshasa and delivered him unto salvation. 24. In chapter 24, the Supreme Guru decides to calm down the delusions arising in the mind of Trivikrama Bharati, who constantly criticized him. The Supreme Guru grants Trivikrama Bharati his universal form, where everyone in that gathering looked like the Supreme Guru. Trivikrama Bharati surrendered to the Supreme Guru. 25. In chapter 25 is the account of how two half-learned but arrogant Brahmins invited Trivikrama Bharati for a debate, how they demanded a Jayapatra without listening to the wisdom-filled words of Trivikrama Bharati, how Trivikrama Bharati took them to meet the Supreme Guru, and how the two arrogant Brahmins arrived there in a grand palanquin while the ascetic Trivikrama Bharati walked on foot. 26. In chapter 26, the Supreme Guru advises the two arrogant Brahmins with words of wisdom and enlightenment. He describes the details of the Vedas and the Vedangas. He extols the greatness of the Vedas in great detail. 27. In chapter 27 is the account of how, in spite of listening to the greatness of the Vedas, the two arrogant Brahmins were stubbornly demanding a debate. How the Supreme Guru decided to teach the two arrogant Brahmins a lesson. And to do that, how he had a lowly man recite the divine Vedas. The two Brahmins surrendered to the Supreme Guru. They were cursed by the Supreme Guru to become Brahmarakshasas. They also sought refuge from the curse. 28. In chapter 28, the Supreme Guru explains the karma vipaka, the consequences of our actions in different lifetimes and the different penitence one has to perform to rid oneself of those sins. He also transformed the lowly man who recited the Vedas back into an ignorant man as a punishment for his arrogance towards his family. 29. In chapter 29 is the account of how sage Vamadeva describes the legend of the Bhasma to the Brahmarakshasa who surrenders to him. In chapter 30 is the account of how the Brahmin named Gopinatha obtained a son with the blessings of Lord Dattatreya, how the son Datta married and the couple were happy, how Datta became sick at a very young age soon after the marriage, how all the medical treatments failed, how, armed with the knowledge of her husband, would be cured just by the merciful sight of the Supreme Guru falling upon her husband. The wife brought her deceased-stricken husband to Gandharvanagara, how he died at the gates of the city, how she refused to hand over her husband's body for cremation, and how the Bhasmas made Rudraksha, wearing ascetic, advised her with words of wisdom. 31. In chapter 31, the Supreme Guru as ascetic explains the protocol of the dharma of a Pativrata woman, along with the narration of the story of Vindhya and the story of Maharshi Agastya and his wife Lopamudra. 32. In chapter 32, the Supreme Guru as ascetic explains the procedure of the dharma of a widow woman. The ascetic also gives 4 Rudraksha beads to the lady to tie to her husband's ears and throat. The lady prepared to enter the funeral pyre. Prepared to enter the funeral pyre of her husband. Before doing that, she went to meet the Supreme Guru who blessed her, saying, "May you enjoy marital bliss and may you have children." To honor his words, the Supreme Guru revived the lady's husbands and provided suitable answers to the people who criticized him. 33. In chapter 33, the Supreme Guru explains the greatness of the Rudraksha beads. He narrates a story of how the prostitute maintained her promise of being a Pativrata, how she entered the funeral pyre, how Lord Shiva appeared before her, and how he saved the prostitute. 34. In chapter 34, the Supreme Guru explains the greatness of Rudra Adhyaya. He narrates the story of how the dead son was revived with the waters from the Rudrabhisheka and how the parents of the boys were blessed. 35. In chapter 35, the Supreme Guru refuses to advise mantras to the lady and states that service to her husband is a woman's highest dharma. He advises to her that Somavara Vrata and how the princess Simantini obtained her husband and her in-laws' kingdom as a result of that vrata. 36. In chapter 36, the Supreme teaches a lesson to the woman who was always craving to eat lunch at other people's house. He also advises the Brahmin and his wife about the daily rituals and good behavior. 37. In chapter 37, the Supreme Guru advises the Brahmin about the procedure of daily rituals, including worshipping the gods, having lunch and tambula, and sleeping. 38. In chapter 38 is the account of the poor Brahmins Bhaskara Sharma, who arrived in Gandharvanagara with enough materials to feed 3 people and who wanted to offer bhiksha to the Supreme Guru. With his merciful blessings, the Supreme Guru made the food limitless so that 4,000 people were fed that day. 39. In chapter 39 is the account of the childless 60-year-old woman who had worshipped the holy Ashwatha tree and had performed the production of the tree for several years without the desires of a child becoming fulfilled. She served the Supreme Guru in the hopes of begetting a child, at least in her next birth. The Supreme Guru advised her in detail the procedure of worshipping the Ashwatha tree and blessed her to beget two children in her present life itself. 60. In chapter 60 is the account of Narahari who was filled with leprosy all over his body. This Narahari served the Supreme Guru with profound devotion. The Supreme Guru gave him a wooden log from the Adambara tree and asked him to plant a piece of dried wood at the Sangama, perform Abhisheka to it and worship it daily with special devotion. The devotee Narahari performed the same and was relieved of his disease. At the same time, the dead piece of wood grew shoots and blossomed into a living tree. 41. In chapter 41 is the account of how the Supreme Guru tested Swayamdeva's faith and devotion. The story of Twastru, giving to his Guru everything that the Guru and his family requested from him. The young boy Twastru meeting an Avaduta and details of the Kashi pilgrimage appear as well. 42. In chapter 42, the Avaduta narrates to Twastru the details of the Kashi pilgrimage and disappears. Twastru obtains the darshan of Lord Shiva as Vishveshwara and is blessed by Lord Shiva to become the Vishwakarma, the architect of the gods. The Supreme Guru advises Swayamdeva to perform the Kashi Yatra. Swayamdeva surrenders to the Supreme Guru and leaves the service of the Muslim Nawab. He and his family became devotees of the Supreme Guru. In 43, in chapter 43, the Supreme Guru advises Swayamdeva about the excellent and divine Sri Ananta Padmanabha Vrata and the procedure of performing the Vrata. He also narrates a story of how sage Kaundinya performed his Vrata and obtained happiness both in this world and in the next. 44. In chapter 44, the Supreme Guru is pleased with the devotion of Tantuka, the weaver, and takes him on a pilgrimage of Sri Shaila on the holy festival day of Shivratri without any impediments. The story of Vimarshana also appears in this chapter. 45. In chapter 45 is the account of the leprosy striker Nandi Sharma who worshipped the goddess for a long time and then sought refuge with the Supreme Guru as per the instruction of the goddess. With the blessings of the Supreme Guru, he was cured of his leprosy and he became a great poet. 46. In chapter 46 is the account of the poet Narakesari who was adamant about not praising anyone else but the Supreme Lord Kalleshwara Swami. During his worship of Lord Shiva, he noticed the Supreme Guru in the place of Lord Shiva and realized that the Supreme Guru was indeed the omnipresent and all-pervading Supreme Lord. He surrendered to the Supreme Guru and became a dear and devoted disciple. 47. In chapter 47 is the account of how the Supreme Guru assumed 8 similar forms and went to 7 different villages at the same time and blessed the devotees on the holy festival of Deepavali while still being at his mata and blessing the devotees there as well. 48. In chapter 48 is the account of the devoted farmer who had full faith in Supreme Guru's words and harvested all his crops 1 month before they were due. A severe chill occurred a few days later and destroyed the crops of everyone in the surrounding region. As a result of heavy downpour of rains, the farmer fields were filled with new lush crops that resulted in him obtaining 100 times the grains that he would have normally obtained. Everything was due to the mercy and blessings of the Supreme Guru. 49. In chapter 49, the greatness of the holy site of Gandharva is explained, along with the greatness of Sangama of the rivers Bhima and Amaraja and the 8 Tirthas. The story of how the sister of the Supreme Guru was cured of her disease is also explained. 50. In chapter 50 is the account of Muslim Nawab who was a washerman in his previous birth. The Muslim Nawab ruled over his kingdom in a righteous manner, but he was stricken with a deadly abscess on his thigh. He was advised by Brahman to seek the darshan of a holy and great man to obtain a cure for that abscess. The Brahmin also narrated the story of a prince who was cured of his deadly disease by the ascetic Rishabha. The Muslim Nawab obtained the darshan of the Supreme Guru and was cured of his abscess. He remembered everything from his past life and he brought the Supreme Guru to his capital in the midst of his grand army, repleted with elephants and horses, and honored him with great pomp and splendor. 51. In chapter 51, the Supreme Guru returned from the palace of the Muslim Nawab to the Sangam of the rivers Bhima and Amaraja. Realizing that his fame had indeed spread far and wide, in order to avoid Muslims coming to Gandharva to seek his blessings, he decided to become invisible to the common eyes of the world. He advised his disciples and the devotees and went to Sri Shaila. There he sat in a splendid flower seat and said, "All of you worship me always. You'll always attain good fortune. I shall eternally remain in Gandharva. Do not grieve for me. I shall grant darshan only to the true devotees. This is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth." Saying this 3 times, he disappeared among the swirling waters of the river to his true abode. In this last chapter, a synopsis of all the chapter is provided. The Guru Samhita is Kamadhenu, the all-wish fulfilling celestial cow. It is also Kalpavriksha, the all-wish fulfilling celestial tree. The human life is the most superior and the most celebrated among all the forms of life. All devotees should seek refuge in the Supreme Guru with purity of body, mind and soul. Become blessed by doing so. Om salutations to Lord Vishnu. Om salutations to Lord Shiva. Om salutations to Lord Brahma. Om salutations to Lord Dattatreya. Om salutations to the Supreme Guru Sri Pada Sri Vallabha. Om salutations to Supreme Guru Sri Narasimha Saraswati. May good and righteous events occur in this world. May virtuosity flourish. May the Supreme Lord bless one and all. Here ends chapter 52 of Sri Guru Samhita, the legend of the Supreme Guru. Synopsis of all the chapter. Om Tat Sat. Om Sri Krishnarpanamastu. Mantrahina, Kriyahina, Bhaktihina, Kshamapate.